my philosophy on prayer is that God is above time. So if you're praying for something that has already happened, since God is above time, he can go back in time and change it and make it so that it didn't happen.
Nobody's gonna love me like you. Nobody, nobody, no. Nobody's gonna love me like you do. Like you. Ooh.
Hey guys, it's Lizzie. So this video is about prayer, and I want to make more videos kind of on how to pray, just advice on your personal faith and how to strengthen it. So I want you guys to comment below any questions you have about prayer, and then also just any devotional Bible study topics that you might want me to make an entire video about. I'm gonna link below a playlist to all my Christian videos. I've made probably like 30 or 50 videos over the years on specifics of a relationship with God. This video is gonna be a little bit different though. It's not gonna really be advice, just kind of a glorifying God type video. I'm gonna tell you all these stories of how God has intervened through prayers. So it was, I think it was the night before my math final, second semester of my junior year of college. And my depression was really bad at this point. I remember one of my best friends kind of snapped at me and she said something like, just get over it, regarding my depression, which is like not what to say to a friend who is depressed. So it really hurt me. I remember running outside of our apartment. I didn't have any shoes on. It was probably like 11 o'clock at night. I remember just like running, and it was just like a pavement road. So just like running, and I went to find this, it's like this lacrosse field. I guess it's a soccer field, but we call it the lacrosse field. It's kind of like on the back part of our campus. So I just like ran there, and I was just like crying, and I felt so disconnected from myself. And it's just like when you're in depression for so long, you do not feel alive at all. It's just like this barely alive type feeling. And I remember just telling God, like, help me, I need help. And I just felt so disconnected from my soul. I felt like if the soul is identity and this is the brain, it was hanging on by a little string that was about to snap. And so I just remember laying on the ground in the grass at night in that field and just praying for God to help me. So the next day, or it might have been 2 days later, but I think it was the next day, one of my guy friends was over at my apartment. And it's really cool that he's a part of this one because he's actually agnostic, but God was working through him so clearly. So he just starts sharing with me about this novel he's working on. And it's kind of crazy because he's agnostic, but the whole novel is about heaven. And it would take a while to kind of explain the premise of it, but he was just explaining for like 30 or 40 minutes in depth, like the plot line and all these intricacies of his novel. And it just, creative writing is something that's very core to my identity, and so he was describing it and it was like vivid in my mind, and it made me feel so incredibly alive. And when I'm in depression, it's like I can't really talk or think when, like, I can't express myself to other people, but when my friends talk, like, I feel everyone's emotions. And so it's like I was so low, I felt so disconnected from reality and from myself, but then my friend comes and tells me this like vivid, amazing story, and it made me feel so alive. And yeah, so that's something, and I've actually told him that, but this is something where God is alive and working in every single person. And so often I will pray for my friends who are not Christian for things going on in their lives, and I believe so strongly that God intervenes for them and with them. Some of the people who helped me the most through my depression don't believe in God, don't know him, they don't know that they know him, but God is in them. So a couple weeks later, I was working Bible lectures at Pepperdine. You might not know what that is. It's kind of like a lectureship Bible camp for adults. But like everyone stays in the dorms and then they go to all these like classes and like worship events. Yeah, it's like Bible camp for adults, but it's like 4 days. So I was working Bible lectures and I was talking on the phone with my parents, and I finally told my parents that I was on medicine for my depression, and my dad freaked out and like yelled at me and made me cry, and it was awful. And then right after that, one of my best friends, her dad died, and my other best friend found her stepdad essentially dead. And so it was, all of this happened in one day. It was the worst day. It was horrible because it was like I was going through so much, but then my best friends were going through so much that they, like, I couldn't ask them to help me because they needed my help, you know? It was just horrible. So that whole week I was crying myself to sleep, and I talked about this in my bipolar story video and in my emotionally abusive relationships video, but I ended up cutting my parents out of my life for about I think a month or 2 or 3 weeks I didn't talk to them, but I didn't go home for the rest of that year. So I remember praying, and we have like Pepperdine has the track, and then there's kind of like this hill area, and it's kind of this like secluded like tree with like a bench around it. So I was sitting there just praying for God to send people to help me, and it was so crazy because that next month I stayed like illegally in the dorms with one of my best friends, and there were 3 girls who we'd already been friends, but we just hung out every single day. And I was working on my YouTube channel, they were doing summer classes, and they had like this energy and joy and passion, like vivaciousness. We went to the beach, we made food together every night, we went grocery shopping, we went out to Santa Monica and LA, we worked out together, I helped them study. They made me feel so incredibly alive, and it was like my depression was so bad, I was barely eating, I felt completely not within reality. And then it's like I have these girls surrounding me who can just emulate so much life and joy, and that was a direct answer to that prayer. And it's kind of crazy just because that was something too with my depression. I never really prayed for it to go away. For some reason I just knew that it wouldn't go away. I knew that wasn't what to pray for, but I just prayed for people, for God to send me people, and he always came through. Okay, number 5 has to do with suicide. I talked about this in depth in my suicidal thinking video, so if you struggle with this or if you have a friend who does, I really recommend going and watching it because I went in depth on every facet of suicidal thinking. But there was one day where I did have suicidal thinking. I had been manic, and then I crashed down into really severe depression. I just felt this complete derealization. It felt like I was so far away from reality, like everything felt like either underwater or just like through a really long tunnel, like barely hearing people who are next to me and touching me. I just felt completely disconnected. And so I remember thinking, you know, I would kill myself if this was a consistent thing. And that's terrifying, a terrifying thought to have, because it's a logical thought. It's not just a passing thought like, oh, kill yourself. It's like a logical thinking. And I wanted to stay alive this whole time. I want to live. I remember praying and telling God to just help me. 2 days later, I was in a small group Bible study with a professor and 2 other students at my university. We had to get convocation credits, and so we could get convo credits from like big worship events or speakers or like smaller Bible studies. It was like a mentorship club convo type thing. So randomly, not even really related to what we're talking about, our professor just starts talking about how his dad was saying if he ever gets Alzheimer's, he could see himself doing physician-assisted suicide. And our professor was so passionate and intense in just saying, no, that's not the purpose of life. Life is like you're climbing up a mountain with other people, and it's not about you and your experience climbing up the mountain. It's about the other people who you're with. You don't give up on people. You don't leave them. And he was so intense, and it shocked me so strongly, because at the beginning when he started talking about it, I was on the side of his dad of the physician-assisted suicide, because he was describing it like how I would describe my depression, because Alzheimer's and depression are so similar in the parts of the brain that begin shutting down and that stop working. And it was just this thing where now I have this solidified logic against suicide anytime I have thoughts like that. And it's something where going into the future, I know I will be suicidal again, and it terrifies me. It's scarring. I hate it. It's so scary. There's a 1 in 4 suicide rate, like successful suicide rate of people with bipolar who kill themselves. And I don't want to end up being a statistic like that. I want to be alive. I just was realizing after that, you know, the reason so many of my friends don't believe that I had depression is because to them, I was me. They were experiencing me as me, even though from my perspective, it was just autopilot. I wasn't really there. They felt me fully there. And so that has just stuck with me, and it makes me not scared to live with bipolar. I'm not scared of the suicidal thinking anymore because I know I have this logic to combat any of those thoughts. So something else, this happened my sophomore year of college as well. So one of my friends committed suicide, or so I thought. I got a text message. She'd been suicidal like the whole year for like 8 months, and it was something where she would text me like how she was thinking of killing herself, when she was, and I was always praying for her. And my friend is actually suicidal again right now, 3 years later. So please pray for her. Pray for God to send people into her life who can love her and who can just be this consistent force of community. Just pray for her to find a church of people who really care about her and just like close relationships where she is, and to feel like she has meaning in her life and just a new job or a new something to get involved in, to love her classes, just like passion, meaning. Just pray for that for her because she really, really needs it right now. But this was my sophomore year, and I was at a retreat this weekend, and I get a text message, and it's like a suicide letter. I remember I was in a Bible study. I was in this Bible study at the time, and we had just been reading the story of how Jesus resurrects Lazarus. And so I remember going to that part of the Bible. This book talks about when you're praying for something, thank God in advance because you trust that he will come through. And so I remember reading the Luke Bible passage about Lazarus, where Jesus is saying like he will rise again, he will live again. And I remember just praying that for my friend, just saying like, no, God resurrects people from the dead. Like, my friend is not dead. And I remember praying this Bible verse over her. And I just ran out into the parking lot, and I remember just like crying and praying and praying and praying that she's not dead. And my philosophy on prayer is that God is above time. So if you're praying for something that has already happened, since God is above time, he can go back in time and change it and make it so that it didn't happen. I didn't hear back from her that whole weekend. So like, just imagine, my friend is dead. I don't have my computer. I don't really know. We don't have mutual friends. I don't know her family. She lives in a different state. So I'm just at this, it was actually like a charismatic retreat I was at, like the charismatic church. I was there with some people from my school. So this happened on like Friday night. So I get back on Sunday, and I message her sister, who I find through her Facebook, and it turns out that she's alive. She didn't die. She didn't kill herself. She was faking her suicide. And so it's like, my friend is still alive, but pray for her because she's going into depression again and she needs help. Ugh, like one of my other friends is suicidal as well. It's crazy, crazy, crazy how many people are hurting and suffering. Another prayer, this is back to related to me. So my senior year of college, one time I was just so upset with my bipolar, and I just was praying, and I'm like, God, why did you give me bipolar? Why me? I hate it. Like, why do I have this? You know how in the Psalms someone will be complaining and ranting angry at God, and then something will happen and they'll just kind of turn and the psalm will just be praising him and thanking him? That's how it was for me when I was praying, because it's like God just kind of gives me like wisdom while I'm praying to him, and he wasn't speaking to me. God has like spoken to me before, and this is not that. I'm very speculative when people say God like directly spoke to them. But I think when we're praying, just like in the Psalms, God like changes our mindset. Like the Holy Spirit is living and active within us. So God, when we're praying, it's not like we're just praying, it's like God is supplying us wisdom and insight as well. So I just realized that I have bipolar and not one of my friends, and I feel so grateful. And so it's like I was complaining to God, and then I start thanking him like so much that I have bipolar and not someone who I love. And then I also realized that I've been able to help, like in the Bible studies I've been a part of, I've been able to be more emotionally open because I start off talking about my depression. And then now it's like on here as well, I'm able to talk about depression and help people. So like all these insights were coming in as I was praying. And I realized that even though it feels like this was destroying my life, and it's like all I wanted to do was serve God and help people, it's like I do get to serve God and help people even more because I have this. And I'm not at all saying that that's why God gave it to me or God wants me to have this, like not at all. And if you have a friend with a mental illness or know someone who's going through something really hard, this is not your place to say, oh, God is using this for good. No, like do not say that. They get to decide if they think God is using it for good. It's not that's just extremely hurtful and invalidating. But this is something that God specifically like showed me kind of thing. And it was just really cool because in the moment, it's just like my mindset completely changed because of the prayer. So one more prayer. So this is, I think, last September. It was when I made my video talking about desert periods in your faith. It's called like I Can't Feel God. It's the video where I'm wearing like a blue, pink, purple like palm tree type shirt and I'm just talking about desert periods in your faith and like depression and God kind of thing. I don't know if you guys have seen that video, but I'll link it below with everything else. So in that video I talked about this moment last summer where God woke me up in the middle of the night. And I do not say things like this very often where like, God spoke to me, God woke me up. Like this stuff, it's rare, but when it happens, you know that it is God. I was in the middle of a dream, and when I have my bipolar, like when I'm really manic, I'll wake up every like hour and a half. So this is something that does happen, and I think God works through the bipolar. So just in general, I can make a whole video talking about like spirituality and mania, because mania helps me experience God so strongly. But this was like in the middle of a dream. And when I'm really, really manic and wake up in the middle of the night, I'm not like in the middle of a dream. It's like I'm at the end of the cycle. That's why I wake up. Because it's like you're waking up within the hour and a half REM cycle after deep sleep. But I woke up in the middle of REM. God just woke me up, and it was like for no reason, and I just immediately felt like wide awake. And it was like, I don't know how to explain this, but it was just like I realized that all of this has been spiritual warfare. Everything that happened last summer with me not wanting to be Christian anymore, almost giving up my faith, wanting God to not exist, all of that was me being spiritually attacked. And so I wake up and I just realize that so strongly. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's just like God like woke me up, and I just started writing like really intensely. Make sure to comment below any requests and questions, and I will for sure make videos based upon your guys' requests. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!